making sure things are perfectly live. So let me find a good blank spot and I'll get to talking. So, okay, so kind of the way I want to do things. I've got my notebook over here, so I'll be looking over there a lot. So kind of how I planned out everything. So basically, the way I think is kind of best to talk about Lip is I wouldn't say boil down tendencies, but more I want to just talk about kind of two aspects of his game that are kind of confusing to people or maybe are not super obvious if you just watch like Overwatch League from like the observer perspective. So there's two things. One is like farm, right? And how he farms EMP and kind of like the question is how does he farm so fast, right? Like how does he get EMP faster than every other Sombra in the game, right? Like how is he always the best at doing that? And how is he doing it versus different comps, right? I think consistently, I think everyone knows that Lip gets EMP faster than literally anyone else in the league, but we're going to kind of look at how he does that. And then also, kind of more than anything else when it comes to his ults, we're not gonna we're gonna more look at like kind of the thought process and what he's looking for, right? And kind of understanding the lip EMP because a lot of people think that he wastes a lot of them, which I do think he does waste some. But we're gonna kind of break it down and understand the way that I think he's thinking about his EMPs and the way he's using them, because I think it's a very different understanding than what we have kind of in North America and what we look at. So let me change my screen. You got an Apex ad? Thanks, man. All right, so let me go to this screen so you can see it. So first, I'm going to talk about how he farms. So how he farms, right? And then number two, I'm going to talk about like so understanding his EMP usage, right? Understanding. I know my handwriting's awesome because my mouse pad's tiny, right? So first off, understand how he farms. We're going to talk about that versus a few different comps, and then how he uses EMP again versus a few different comps. So um, basically so first off, starting off with farm. So most important things for lip in like in getting the most farm possible is just like in the basic sense, like increasing his uptime, right? So having the highest uptime possible, I mean, makes a lot of logical sense. If you have higher uptime, your farm's gonna be higher, right? The more time you spend out of invis, more time you spend actually shooting tanks and actually getting value in mid fight, you're gonna farm faster, right? But also kind of in the same vein, he does a few different things when it comes to like how he's farming and who he's focusing and where he's doing it from that makes it easier to farm. And it's going to depend on what comp he plays against, right? So versus a brawl comp, right? So there's going to be brawl and then versus more like dive comps, right? So versus brawl comps, what's going to happen is so right now red's going to be enemy team and black is going to be blue team, is going to be his team. So if I let me give myself a little bit more space. So I'll do it in blue. So we got brawl, and we got dive, right? So dive's going to include like ball comps, some Winston comps, but we can get into that discussion later. So brawl comp, brawl's got their core here. What he's going to be doing more is they're going to have ball coming from one angle, right? Tracer coming from another from a very basic perspective, and then they're going to have backline here, right? And what Lip's going to do is Lip will start from an angle in spam, but then slowly join in with backline. Oh no, sorry, wrong matchup, right? Lip will also join in from another angle, right? What they're trying to do is they're trying to bait out resources from Brawl, right, and force out more than what Brawl can actually deal with, right? Make it really, really hard for their diva to deal with all the spam from multiple angles, make it hard for the Reinhardt to deal with all that, and basically their whole thought process is not everyone's going to get value, but someone will, right? If they're deciding to block off Lip, then say Tracer and Ball get value, right? If they decide to hard focus Ball, then Backline and Lip will get value, right? Someone's going to get value. There's not enough damage mitigation on the side of most Brawl comps to actually deal with this, right? So what Lip's going to do here is Lip's going to set an additional angle, and when he does this, because someone like Hawk or someone like Gator has to focus more attention elsewhere, he's going to farm for free, right? And what he's going to do is he's going to uncloak early, right? So Brawl comp's going to rotate, Brawl comp rotates, and then Lip's gonna uncloak and start farming, and then his team engages. Right, so we'll look at that in a minute. And then versus dive comps, what he's gonna do is you're gonna have basically there's kind of two phases to like ball mirrors, like ball dive mirrors. Is there's going to be like a laning phase and more of like a map control phase. Earlier fights where the attacking team is going to try and wrest map control from the defending team, and on attack side, Lip likes to help his ball tracer, tries to help them force out the enemy ball so his backline can move for free. And then once they force out the front line, what he'll actually do is like basically there's like this laning phase with more of a spam aspect to it, more of like a abstract, more like kind of open control, where control is map control is based on where the Sombra tracer and ball are, right? And backline is trying to play for map positioning. But then once the backlines have closed distance and they've gotten to a point where they feel like they can start a good brawl, there's going to be a brawl, right? So it's going to be basically a brawl mirror, right? Backlines are going to hit, divas are going to decide to dive in or peel for backline, right? DPS go in, right? And what's going to happen here is instead of doing this, what Lip ends up doing is you've got enemy core here, right? And then you've got like ball tracer, right, coming from their angles, right? They could be coming together. But what Lip does is backlines here, and Lip will be with team and lean towards that core, right? And what he ends up doing here is he's not trying to set an additional angle. What he's trying to do is just maximize uptime, right? In these kind of brawl fights. So in this matchup, Brawl has the difference here is that this Brawl has a significant power spike in the middle of a fight, whereas this dive comp's going to have initial engage, and then they lose mid fight, and then they win and re-engage, right? Whereas this Brawl comp's going to be weak at the beginning, and then once they get this mid fight, and then they slowly lose value over time, right? So what Lip's trying to do here is he's trying to hard engage and get a lot of aggressive value out of this, right? And then he'll disengage and then try and get more value out of this power spike. Whereas in this comp, what Lip's trying to do is since they're both have this pretty similar power spikes, is he's just trying to is here since both teams are playing like this. It's kind of I don't really want to draw it. I think it's too complicated and depends too much on a map. But basically, there's going to be like this laning phase, forcing out angles, forcing out balls so they can't threaten our backline nearly as much. And when our ball tracer engages, or Lip's ball tracer engage in this situation, he's going to sit more with backline and try and play for their mid fights, right? So when this brawl happens, a brawl is essentially just a mid fight, right? It is teams butting heads, right? Investing resources at each other at close distance, right? It is a mid fight being forced, right? And in this time, Lip is going to sit closer to his team and just play for mid fight value, right? He's going to play to spam out tanks. He's going to play to force out resources in mid fight. And what his mentality seems to be is that he doesn't need to make a play. He just needs to get a ton of value over time, right? He'll sit with his team, and he's more likely to get a lot more damage if he's with his Briggs if he's near his Diva, right? If he's sitting there and he's able to farm, if he's able to get a lot more hacks off, right? And use his insane mechanical skill to just kind of get tons of consistent value, he's going to do that, right? And in this mirror, he does get a lot out of that, right? And when he's with the team, he can get hacks off easier, right? He gets a ton more damage out. So it looks like that mentality's worked out pretty fucking well for him. And that's kind of what you'll see. So versus Brawl comps, he's going to take way more aggressive, way earlier angles, right? And versus dive comps, he's going to more help with the laning early and then be with his backline when like the actual head-to-head brawl happens, and hope he tries to get value out of that. So first, I'm going to look at how he plays versus brawl. So and this isn't like an end all be all, like every single time he versus brawl, he's going to take an aggressive angle, right? It's just a tendency, right? Sometimes, like on this neutral here, you'll see that he spends more time with team, right? So maybe I'm sure they know that Atlanta's going to run some kind of brawl. So, yeah. But what you'll see is that he tries to go really aggressive at the beginning and tries to get a lot of farm at the beginning and tries to just assess the situation. And from there, he's like, okay, I can disengage, I can get out, and then just re-engage from an aggressive angle later. So let's go to his POV for this. All right, so the neutral, he has the same rollout for every single neutral on this map. He always goes out this way. He always does it the same exact way, and he's trying to get this health back. He ends up getting health back, gets the hack out, right? He throws Translocator out, Something that's interesting about his translocator placement is that he's pretty smart about it. Whereas he understands that his core is going to give space, right? So um, about translocator, let's do one more quick draw. Um, so enemy core is here, his core is here, right? And then we've got like ball, tracer, and like sombra, right? Let me draw it from a better perspective. Let me do it this way. So enemy core is here, ball, tracer, and then backline, right? So what Lip does with his translocators is Lip. So a lot of people would think to put their translocator like here, right? Because like it's with my backline. But what he does is he kind of skips a step and he decides he's going to put his translocator a little bit further back, right? And he doesn't really care about specifics a lot of the time. He has a general area he wants to put it. He puts it near health pack, sure, that's fine, right? What he does is he puts it far back and he puts it where he thinks his backline is going to back up to, right? So what's going to happen is enemy brawl core is going to push in, our backline gives space, our Tracer Sombra can hit on that engage too. He'll hit on this engage, right? And then once our backline lives and stabilizes, once Lip gets forced out, he ends up here and he's safe, right? And he's with his backline again. And then he can continue farming with his backline if he wants, or he can throw a Translocator back and go more aggressive on this next rotate, right? So versus Brawl, what he'll do is he puts his Translocator further back than where his backline is going to back up to, right? Like probably just towards the edge of it, right? What Atlanta does in this neutral is actually really good, where they scouted where Lip likes to put his translocators. They scouted he liked to put it on top of this during this neutral. They end up breaking it and they try to force him out. They end up not doing that because just a solo diva on a Sombra into this backline is probably not going to work out as a very good trade. But what he does most of the time is that backline will be like right about like here, like what you'll see in this neutral is that what the plan is that backline's here, he throws translocator here, right? Backline has to back up and give space, and then he translocates here, and he's got an aggressive angle, and he can throw a translocator back here again, and every single place that the backline backs up to, he's always going to be set up again, right? And he can throw a translocator back further if he wants to, or he can put it aggressive and he can go for angles, right? He's got a ton of options, but general idea is that he's going to put it further back than where his backline's going to back up to, so that he has like a little bit of leeway, right? And also it's going to change depending on different comps. So like versus a 6-man comp, it's going to be pretty difficult. And what you'll see versus Dallas actually is that Doha does a really good job of trying to hunt down his translocator and prevent him from being able to re-engage the way he wants to, right? And a lot of times they'll focus down Lip early because I think Dallas did a really good job of recognizing that dragons are really, really reliant on Fate and Lip's playstyle, right? Especially in these Sombra comps, right? Those two are like hard carrying just in how they play. So they do a really good job of focusing them down. But either way, that's kind of how he's going to use his translocators. And let me go back to his POV. You can watch it, right? So early fight farms, right? He's not trying to set a hard angle in this early fight. His priority was getting his health back so he can play around it, or his team can play around it, right? And right now he's just trying to set pressure, right? There it was. His translocator got broken by what's it called? By Masa. And then on that, Hawk tries to dive him. He ends up living because Hawk's feeding into backline. This trade's actually perfectly fine because if you were here for the Fate VOD, you saw that like we're kind of okay trading our tanks. We're kind of okay trading 2 for 1 because we'll get back faster. Or our long value, our value over time is way stronger. As in like our backline is going to get value over time. And we've got people who can set angles aggressively, and without a diva, they can't really do with anything about it, right? If that happens, right, Lip sends his translocator back out again, and if he needs to, he can translocate out, right, and he can set another angle, it's fine, right? But look, all he's doing this whole time is he's not worried about setting up super hard, right? All he's worried about is just farming, right? Once he gets forced out, got translocator back, right? Puts it back again. If his backline gets walked on, he'll be safe, and he'll be able to reset an angle, right? And you'll see here is something that's really, really important about how Lip plays against Brawl comps is that he's extremely aggressive with his angle setting, right? And trying to force the other team's diva to make a decision, right? So another little diagram real quick. We can look at it with how Atlanta's set up right now, actually. So if you look at how they're set, if Atlanta's here, right, or they're set up on this point, right, Lip comes from this angle, and then Fleta and Fate come from here, and then Shanghai's backline comes up like here, right? It forces the tanks to make a decision, right? They can't block everything. It's going to be impossible, especially with all these squishies. So it's impossible. So what Lip does is Lip sets an additional angle and threatens backline and forces like Hawk to make a decision basically, like who's more valuable to block. And in this case, it's really really hard because your choices are Fleta, Lip, Fate, Izzy. Like it's an insanely hard decision to make. So um, he does this, and whatever choice Hawk makes, they're going to be able to punish it, right? If Hawk decides to fly on Lip and invest rockets, right? He flies out of position, Lip gets an extra bit of farm, and then Hawk's not there to protect, right? When Flood and Fate go in. So these really, really aggressive angles are always super helpful when it comes to forcing resources out of Atlanta's tanks. Because in the end, Atlanta's comp is just going to try and live, just try and sustain through these hard engagements, and then force that mid fight, right? Force a hard brawl in which they can actually get their advantage. But it's going to be really, really hard if Dragons keep setting these aggressive angles and getting value out of these pinches. And yeah, Lip's a really, really big part of that, right? So you'll be able to see in all these fights, especially on the re-engages, his angles are extremely aggressive, right? So the re-engage happens, right? He's sitting here, look, he's forcing Hawk to make a choice. And when he does that, someone gets value, right? And this whole time he's just gonna sit here. He doesn't get forced out. He sits out. He sits in positions that are really really safe for him, right? So he doesn't stand in the open if he's taking these aggressive angles. He sits near cover, right? He's setting himself up in a place where he's like he understands like the longer he stays in the fight, the more farm he's going to get, right? So he starts this fight at or this like this re-engage at 45%, and this whole time he doesn't get forced out because he's sitting near cover. He keeps enough distance. He does a really good job of keeping distance and playing his effective range. Like he doesn't get into the backline all the time, right? He gets into the backline when he gets to cleanup phase. But in this early phase, he keeps his distance. He forces people to stretch their resources thin, so he doesn't get forced out as easily, and he gets enough farm, right? He's still well within his effective range right now, right? He can do just as much damage as he does normally, but he's got such good mechanics that the range isn't that big of a deal. And also, he forces Hawk to play on this string, right? Forces Hawk to fly out here to help him. And in this time, Hawk gets hacked, right? He can't help Gator, and Gator gets run over. And it makes it really, really hard for Atlanta to actually do anything because Lip is stretching them so thin, right? And when you like look at his discipline when it comes to playing cover, right? He's always playing around these corners, right? In mid fight, he's looking for value hacks. Nothing too special about that. I think his focus on tanks is really really important, as in like he's trying to stretch Atlantis tanks then rather than like assassinate backline. Like he looks to assassinate backline when Hawk's not there, right? But if Hawk's there, he's trying to fuck up Hawk, right? Because he understands that Hawk is one of the angle denials on that team, and if he can enable his angles and enable more of his carries to get value, he's going to do a great job, right? So this fight, what I want to look at is I want to look at kind of what we're talking about with the power spikes. Whereas, so you'll see Lip is very focused on farming early, right? Because he understands that if we don't win right here, it's okay. We can win again on a re-engage, right? Atlantis power spikes the red, Shanghai's is the black, right? He understands that like he's just trying to farm his EMP as fast as possible. And if they don't win this power spike, it's fine. They just disengage and win for this one, right? And he can get his EMP and play for this. So, let's see. Like he's gonna sit here and he's aggressively farming the whole time. He's not worried about setting up every single angle all the time, right? On these early engages, all he's focused on is trying to find any angle where he can farm, right? He translocates out. His team's going to go for an engage, right? Without him, it's fine because they know they don't need to win immediately, right? They're okay taking a 5v6 because they're not focused on winning right now, right? And they're going to engage, and then they're going to disengage. They're going to engage. They get value off that first engage, and like we were talking about in the Fate VOD, where it's like they're going to invest, see what they can do from there. If they get value, perfect. They're going to keep going. If they don't, then they back up and try again, right? They engage, and they're like, okay, we can keep going. Lip gets here, throws out an EMP, and then it's a pretty easy fight to clean up here, right? Backline walks, and they just go from there, right? Especially with Fate causing a lot of disruption. Really, really good job. But this whole time, in this early fight, he's very, very aggressive about just farming tanks, right? Always setting an angle, um, and he's not as focused on being set up for a first engage all the time. He's worried about getting EMP up and then using EMP when he has it, right? So that's kind of part of how he's farming. Translocator placement, we talked about that a second ago, right? Um, Whereas when he's far back, Like he sets it up so if his backline needs to back up, he's always set up behind them, and he can always help out where needed. He's just like if he gets his translocator broken and he's stuck, then that makes his job really hard. So, um, not as big of a deal, I think, in this matchup specifically, because there's not really anyone who can deal with it, so he's not too concerned. Um, yeah, and again, like he's okay being forced out in these early fights. Like he's okay with that as long as he can communicate that and say like, hey, like I'm going aggressive, or he can communicate that he gets forced out and his team knows that they might not have enough resources to keep going. Right? He's fine. Right? And we'll talk about EMP usage in a minute. But first off, we're just talking about farm. Early he scouts. I'm assuming he's scouting, right? And in this fight, because they're looking for a hard at first engage, what he's going to do is he's going to try. When they go for these, when they get into a situation where they're like, hey, we're going to win the fight right here, and they're focused on winning right now, he sets really aggressive angles, right? When his team is focused on like winning right now, he sets really aggressive angles and stays, right? That's what he does here, right? He sets a really, really aggressive angle and he sits here and cleans up, right? And he's farming EMP this whole time, right? He's just going to farm tanks. Look to finish kills where he can, and he just farms tanks, right? In setting this aggressive angle, like you can see how he's forcing Hawk and forcing Gator to make decisions, right? If we watch that one more time, you can see how hard it would be for someone like Hawk to deal with all this damage. And he's just gonna farm any target he can find, right? Or like Hawk can't deal with all this, especially because we looked at it last time with Fate, right? How Fate does a really good job isolating and splitting off these tanks, and then Lip can just farm for free. All right, and then what's the next one? Um, so yeah, and it's like early fight, he's okay being forced out because he just needs to be there for second engage, right? He just tries to get back fast, and a lot of times you'll see that there's not as much priority. Like yeah, sure, being on that really really aggressive angle is good, right? Like he's okay with that. Like he wants to be on that aggressive angle, but if he can't, it's okay, right? He can sit close to backline and he can just play to give. He can play to web, right? He's okay playing near his team, and he's okay playing near his backline and just getting an angle where he can, right? He understands that like they're gonna play for this early engage and they're just gonna try and get value off that. That's fine. Okay. So that's versus Brawl. And now I want to look at versus ball comps real quick and kind of the playstyle versus ball comps. Get a little review of that. Sorry, I haven't checked anything. So, oh shit, hello. All right, sorry, I haven't looked at this. Um, but let me pull up chat on my phone so I can actually see it. um, so, any questions so far about anything while I pull this up? If so, I will be able to see in just a second. Um, okay. No, I'm not view botting myself. You already asked your question? What is it? Where is it? Oh. How often does he TP away? Okay, sorry. How often does he actually TP away, or is he able to trust his backline to pocket him? So it depends. I would say it looks like he sticks with his backline a lot in the mid fight because he's like all in with them, right? Whereas like once the mid fight actually hits, especially in these ball comps, like he sticks with the backline, right? He stays nearby. So that's what I'm seeing a lot of. Okay. So let's talk versus ball comp and kind of how he plays that. Quick macro and mirrors talked about that like a little bit earlier, where it's like it's all about your backline, right? Try and set up backline, try and play for backline, try and get them value over time, and try and get them set up for this mid fight. Try and get them set up in a really good spot so they can force a really good mid fight for our Briggs End, right? We want to get them value over time in that brawl. So it's kind of all about setting them up. And in order to set them up, we need to force out their tanks and take away as many resources from their tanks as possible, take away their ability to set angles, and hopefully get a lot of value off that. So it's not coming up on my phone. So Erm. Please load. Chatterino on my phone. Please load. Why? I will leave VODs up. I'm gonna upload it to YouTube too. So, um, yeah. Hopefully it'll come up on my phone soon, so I'll be able to read it. But um, either way, here we go. So early fight. Gonna see Lip. Where is he? So first off, Lip's a fucking animal. So like he just takes 1v1s. It's insane. Like his mechanical skills nuts where like he will just like I mean, I do think that him taking duels versus a tracer is not a bad idea at all, being that like he's gonna have backline LOS here, or like he'll have help from his backline to go and force this, right? And their tracer won't have as much, right? He does a really good job playing environment, right? And he's just trying to force out positioning, right? And he's going to move with his ball tracer and trying to help his backline setup, right? They're coming in, they're going to try and force, all they're going to do is try and force out Fearless, right? And the way he's farming is he's just hard forcing out these tanks, right? He in this early fight, he's setting up to make plays on tanks and to just farm them as much as possible, right? In the mid fight, he's going to do a lot of his farming work in the mid fight, but in this early fight, he's just hard farming tanks, right? And he's looking to make plays. So in ball comps, one of the early win conditions or one of the easiest early win conditions is hack a tank and fuck them, right? Because a lot of times how these ball comps are going to be set up in early fights, let me show you, is like this, right? So these ball comps are going to be set up in these early fights with tanks set up forward and holding space. Like that's great, right? I want my tanks to hold space forward, right? And I want my backline to be set up a little bit further back so they're safer, right? So they can't just be hit for free, right? And they can't be angled on easily, right? That's how this is going to work. But there's one downside to that. It's the fact that if someone like Lip sets up to make a play and hacks one of these tanks, it makes it really easy for us to go in and punish, right? So, like in the early fight, when these tanks are split from their backline, it's pretty easy to just hack a tank and then we hard punish, right? Because their backline can't do as much about it, right? Their brig's going to be out of the fight. So it's much easier to focus down a tank early and just get a quick advantage if we can get a hack off, right? So Lip's going to set up to do that in these early fights. Like in the beginning, he's going to set up just a farm and see if he can get hacks off, right? He also does a really good job being aware of his backline's LOS. So his backline's under bridge on left side, right? And you'll see right here in this mid fight, right? His team starts to engage. He ends up joining with backline, right? He goes to hack tanks and they just focus tanks down, right? I think that Void makes a mistake here, or not Void makes a mistake, but Void gets demeched really quickly, or gets demeched early and makes it really hard for Shanghai's backline to live. So Void ends up getting punished. It makes this mid fight really, really hard. But either way, Lip's got fucking EMP already. Right? You can see one, his mechanics, and two, he does a really good job of just forcing out tanks really early. He understands that like while the carries in this comp are going to be your Brig Zen, right? In the mid fight, they're going to carry a shit ton when it comes to Discord, when it comes to Inspire uptime, right? They're going to do a ton of the work. But he understands that they're only able to do that if their tanks are alive, right? Like you'll see Void, if he gets demeched, it makes it so hard for this backline to live, right? Void is an integral part of making sure the Briggs End backline lives because he can eat so much of the damage, right? I mean, pretty obvious he's a tank, right? Same thing with Fearless or Fate, right? Makes it a lot easier for them to get invaluable engages if they're able to go in for free, right? And they're able to live. So he does a really good job of forcing them out, and he gets kind of two things for one, right? He forces out their enablers, right, and makes it harder for Dallas's backline to play, but he also farms EMP fucking hard, right? So he starts off this fight at 50, right, and then mechanically he hits every shot, right? So he just farms an entire wrecking ball, right? And his mechanics help him out a shit ton, right? But also his target focus is great. Whereas in the beginning, if it's more of a neutral mid fight, he's forcing out tanks. If they have an advantage, right, he's going to look to kill backline. Okay. He can look for opportunities, right, and he can look for plays. But for the most part, he's just farming. He's getting EMP. He's going to get EMP every single fight, right? It's insane. So, um, so yeah, but like he does he basically farms in kind of two phases versus ball comps, right? He farms really early, right? And he's looking to make plays on tanks. And then there's downtime while he sets up with backline, and then he goes with backline, right? So like farm holy shit, that's awful. Farm tanks. He like farm tanks early, right? And then farm. I'm just gonna say core mid fight, right? But like he plays early. He plays actively with his front line, right? Helps them force out positioning in the beginning, and he farms tanks and looks for plays on tanks. And then mid fight hits, and he makes plays on core, right? Which is generally going to be a lot of tanks. But if you can catch someone out of positioning, like you can get fielder out of position, then he's going to go for that, right? So yeah. Um, He's less aggressive in the mid fight, which is important. Like we saw with brawl comps, right? He would be positioned like 90-degree angle or more from his team, right? And a lot of times he'd try and set up really aggressively, but not all. Like sometimes he'd be with team depending on how long the fight was going to go. But it's like if he was going for a really hard engage, he'd be set up on an aggressive angle while his team would be setting up from somewhere else. But if he was with but if they were playing for a longer fight, he'd be closer to backline, so he can increase his longevity, right, and stay for a longer time. Um, but versus like in this ball mirror, he's focused on winning this long mid fight. So he sits closer to his team so he can manage his uptime and stay in for as long as possible, right? He's not worried on assassinating backline because in this matchup versus someone like Hanbin versus like an Overwatch League team that's this good, it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard to just go in and solo assassinate backline. It's not impossible, right? But generally he's gonna sit with team and play for team. Okay. Um, So there's the first one. Let me look at another fight. Hit 350. Kind of look at his positioning. Oh, also on that first one, you saw how he puts his translocator back, right? How he puts it away from the team. All right. Okay. So here's one mid fight, real quick. Let me show how he's positioning with backline, right? He positions near his backline so they can help him, right? He's not worried about setting a super aggressive angle because it's not super necessary, right? Especially when he's with his team, he'll have long-term support, right? Just farming with team. Right, he's just trying to get damage out, right? He's trying to invest as much resources as he can into this mid fight and get value out of that, right? Because in this matchup, if you get forced out in the mid fight as the Sombra, your team just loses a significant amount of their damage, right? It makes it really hard for your team to win mid fights if you're down like a decent portion of your damage, just because there's so much healing going on, right? You've got Inspire going on, you've got orbs going on, right? You've got Diva who can actually eat a ton of your damage, right? It just makes it really hard if you're down damage in these mirrors. So Lip's goal in this is just trying to live as long as possible, right, and stay in. Okay. Um. So yeah, and again, still farming tanks, right? He does look for individual targets when he thinks he is an opportunity to force out more resources, right? But for the most part, it's just like he's getting out literally as much damage as possible, right? Literally as much as possible in these mid fights by staying forever, having really disciplined positioning, right? Staying near cover so he doesn't get forced out super easily, right? And yeah, check. And then after this, we'll talk about the EMP and how he EMPs. So, um, so yeah. Hello, Geekake. How's it going? All right. So, time to talk about the most important thing I think about understanding Lip is understanding his EMPs. So, let me do a little bit of a drawing here. So, how visible is this? Stop. Stop. Okay. Cool. So, the Lip EMP. So, given the background information we've got now on Lip, the fact that like in the mid fights he's going to play with team, he's going to brawl with team, he's going to have his team support him, and he is going to get a ton of damage out, right? With that in mind, he's going to get EMP every fight and a half, about, right? Yeah, it is super important. EMP is a super important ability, super important ult, right? But if you're getting it so frequently, you don't need to guaranteeing a fight win every single time is way too hard against Overwatch League teams, especially with really good positioning, it's really, really hard to say like, hey, I'm going to get a 6-man EMP. I'm going to get all the backline in it, right? So what he does is more than anything else, um, in like this fight, right? We talked about how if your Sombra gets forced out, you lose a ton of damage, right? If you lose any one piece in this mirror in the mid fight, it's really, really hard to win that, right? So Lip with his EMPs seems to have this mentality of I'm not trying to guarantee a fight win every single time. I'm just trying to guarantee an advantage, right? So what you'll see him do a lot of time is he solo EMPs a tracer, right? Or he EMPs just ball, like ball diva, right? Or he'll just EMP one of the backline, right? Or he'll just usually the one of the backline's hard. You usually need to get both, but just EMP one, just EMP someone out of position, right? He's not trying to guarantee a fight win. He's just trying to guarantee an advantage, right? Because if you look at it, and if you look like I guess statistically, right? If dragons go into a fight and they demech Hanbin early, right? It's so hard for them to come back from that, right? It's so hard to come back without a diva who can help you stabilize. So they're like, hey, if we just solo EMP Hanbin, and if Hanbin feeds and I see an opportunity, I'm going to EMP him. And when I do, we demech him and we can stabilize way better and we just play the long fight and we win, right? If I catch Sparkle out of position, right? I solo EMP him, I can win that 1v1, or I can have my team help him. We punish him down. Now they're down a tracer, they're down a good bit of their damage. We win the long fight, right? We win that mid fight. So he's not EMPing to guarantee a fight win. It's like, hey, we EMP and we win right there because that's not the win condition in this mirror. Like sure it can be like you can win off of just EMPing someone and then focusing them down and then like you could just win off of EMPing four and then just winning off that. Like that's true. Like you can do that. And if you see an opportunity for that, go for it, right? But it's really really hard to set that up every single time, especially when your Sombra's being forced out so quickly. So what he's gonna do is he's gonna sit close to his backline, sit play with his team, and in these early fights, just look for opportunities, right? If I see someone I'm going to EMP, I'm calling it. Hey, I'm EMPing right now. I'm EMPing Tracer right now. EMPing Tracer on point, right? He just does it. No holds barred. Just goes for opportunities he sees, right? And his teammates follow up on it, right? They trust him. They trust him. He's like, hey, like I'm EMPing right now. 3, 2, 1, go. And he EMPs, and then his team's there, right? Every single time. So it's a combination of the fact that just pulls the trigger and he's an opportunist, right? He looks for opportunities. Like he's not looking for big plays. He's like, hey, I'm going to hit one or two, and that's all I need because I'm not trying to force a win here. All I'm trying to do is I'm trying to sway the odds in our favor for this mid fight, right? So, um, like guaranteeing a fight win 100% of the time is really, really hard, whereas guaranteeing just a 20% advantage is really easy. So he just does that all the time, right? And he sets himself up in places where he can just punish anyone who feeds, right? Someone steps out of position, EMP, and they're out, right? It's so much easier to get off than a hack, and he just goes for it. He treats it like a neutral hack, right? And you can hit more often than more people. That's great, right? But he uses it to punish a lot of the time, and he just looks for opportunities. And it's okay for them, like it's okay for them to waste, like in a sense that they're going to get it back fast, and also that if you're looking for opportunities, it's okay to kind of waste a little bit, right? It's okay to take chances. And what they trust is, I'm sure they trust Lip's intuition, where it's like, hey, I see an opportunity, and like I can't communicate, like I can't plan opportunities, right? As a player and as this game works, people make decisions. Like people make decisions, people make mistakes, right? You can't plan. Like I can't plan and say Fearless is going to feed at 3 minutes and 27 seconds, right? Like you can't plan that. You can't plan people making mistakes. So Lip just sets himself up positions where he can punish those with his EMP, right? He's just looking for opportunities. I just hit my desk. So he's just gonna hit opportunities where he can, right? Give me a second. I need to my nose is fucking itchy as hell. So give me a second. I need to like scratch it and shit, and I don't want to like record that. Oh, kind of hurts. Okay. Hello. All right. So the focus is that he just sets himself up to punish opportunities. Okay, that makes sense. Hopefully it does, because I'm not looking at chat. Because fuck you, fuck chat interaction. Okay, so the lip EMP is much more centered on hitting opportunities and punishing people who go out of position. Right. So let's look at Lip's EMPs in the ball mirror because we're already on this map. So there's 2 on first point, from what I remember. I just need to get to where he has EMP, so we can talk about what we just talked about one more time. Okay, so here, right? So it looks like he's setting up for a big EMP here, right? I think he ends up getting like railed here. I'm trying to remember. No, he doesn't. He just gets scouted out. Right? They decide to cancel on a hard hit, right? It's not like he's not setting up for hard hits ever. But look, so right here, what he sees is that he sees that Sparkle's isolated, right? There's no one who can help him if he gets EMP'd. Like literally no one. No one can do anything about it, right? His backline's close enough. He's got follow up nearby. If not, he could probably win this on his own. He just sees Sparkle here. He's like, hey, I'm gonna EMP Tracer, EMP Tracer. Does it. No holds barred, right? And then they play to win point. Now they've got control over arguably the most important part of the map. Like they've got objective control, right? There's no tracer. And then he's just gonna sit here in the mid fight, and he's going to play for mid fight value, right? Here, I think Shanghai probably could have won the fight if they had been able to pop trans, like a reaction trans to this EMP. They don't. Izyaki's gonna get farmed. They don't have. They barely missed out on rally. If they had rally, it might have been winnable. But now they're just playing mid fight, and it's gonna be really, really hard without backline. Fleta does trade out for Jexay, but then Fate dies, and it's gonna be hard. Then in the end, he used EMP at the beginning of this fight. Now he's at 65 to his next. Like there's the principle of his, like what's it called? Um, his mid fight where he sits near the crates back down there, sits there and just lives the whole time and just farms. Here he gets kind of railed. It's funny. Yeah, Fielder just fucks him. Like that just happens. But let's look at his next EMP here. So his team rallies. They're in the mid fight, right? Tries to focus down or tries to force out Doha or at least mark him so Doha can't take an extra angle, right? Mid fight hat comes out on Jexay, probably a miss. Right, we're in fight. He sees he can EMP, and he gets Fearless and Jexay, right? And that's fine, right? Lee Jae-gon dies, but in this mid fight, he's okay with it, right? He's just looking to punish people. He's not looking to win the fight, right? Because if you look at it, like if he doesn't pull the trigger there, so if we watch this back one more time, right? He's not hesitating. That's what I like. That's what I like really, really like about his EMP usage, right? He doesn't hesitate. He's like, hey, I see an opportunity. I'm going to EMP now. Like, I'm just going to look for it, right? And it's not a guaranteed fight win. They still trade out. Like, Lee Jae-gon still dies, right? They trade out. It's not a guaranteed win, but it's an advantage, right? And he's banking on the fact that this mid fight, they're going to win. They're going to have an advantage, right? EMP happens. He hits 2 with it. That's all he needs. Now Jexay can't push out because he's hacked, and it's an advantage on point. And they end up winning this brawl. Fearless ends up feeding for it, right? He gets a mid-fight hack on him, or a neutral hack, and it's good from there. Right? He's just forcing advantages. That's all he's doing. He's not winning fights with it. Like, it's not like an EMP6 and we just win. We team wipe. It's not how it works, right? He's just forcing advantages every single time. Okay. Let's go to the next EMP. Farming early. He's just trying to force honesty out of Dallas's front line. He doesn't want them set up for free. Right, in the mid fight, we can see a lot of uncloaked movement. Right, he spends a lot of time just farming. Right, dueling out tracers, especially when he's got his ball tracer nearby. I will say the downside of this playstyle, it seems, is that if you are super aggressive like this, you can be forced out in moments where your team might need you, right? Or your team might want you to be there. But I think there's the trade-off does come with a benefit where it's like, hey, you farm EMP super, super fast, just at the disadvantage of your team needs to understand they might have to take 5v6s, right? Or they might have to take delayed 6v6s, right? They won't be able to engage first every single time, right? Or if you're going super aggressive like this, you can get focused down, right? Or what Dallas does a really good job of, if Dallas does a good job of sending Doha, like when they find that Lip is on aggressive flanks, they send like Doha will find Translocator, or he'll hunt Translocator, and when they find Lips on aggressive angles, they just destroy and punish, right? So like there's a trade-off in the fact that like Lip can be punished, but also he's going to get EMP so often that it's not that big of a deal sometimes, right? Especially when his team can just win fights anyways, right? He's got teammates who can make plays and teammates who don't really need him, right? Like if lip is down, they lose a lot of mid-fight damage. Sure, that's fine, but there's also the win condition of winning on an initial engage, right? And they can try and do that, or they can just try and trade out value. So it's okay, I think. All right, so mid-fight here, he's with backline. He just EMPs target. He just EMPs if he can, right? Almost focuses down a tracer, but he forces out trans, and that's fine. Like he's okay with that. And then they rally and EMP. This is probably a worse trade for Shanghai because they use both support ults. And they do it for both, but Dallas is going to get more value out of them because they stagger them, I think. And also they have better spawns, so Dallas is going to get more out of it. Yeah, but this whole mid fight, you can see his positioning again. Sits nearby team, right where he's got help. That's a really good example of where of his translocator in regards to fight movement actually. Whereas he understands that the fight might move out of choke soon, so he throws translocator further back. So when he translocates out, he's not stuck out. He's always thinking about where the fight might go next, right? Instead of putting it where he was going to put it normally, with that with the health back, he just throws it somewhere else and throws it out of the way and throws it back where the fight might happen again, so he can join backline. All right, we'll look at this next EMP. This next EMP is a really good one, actually. A really good one when it comes to opportunities and just looking for any opportunity to get anything, right? He's just looking for instant, like not instant value, but like he's not looking for massive value. He's just looking for some value, right? Looking for an advantage, right? Here we talk about early fight. Early fight, he's helping lane with this tracer fall, right? Trying to force out angles with them. He gets forced out first. It's fine. Ugh, my nose. And then here with this EMP, right? His backline's forcing a fight over there, or his backline gets dove down there, but they. Oh, hello. Ah. Oh, hello. Thank you for the follow. But right. So here, in this situation, his backline's taking a fight over here, but what he sees is that he can hit their backline in rotation. So he just like, hey, I've got an opportunity. EMPs. He calls it, and look what Fate and Fleta do immediately, right? Fate and Fleta just dive immediately. They're like, fuck that. Like we're going on the EMP targets, right? So there's a combination of Lip sees an opportunity and he just pulls the trigger and goes for it, right? And when he does that, um, what's it called? Like his team's always there to follow up on it. You saw it with the Sparkle one. You saw it with this EMP, right? He just sees an opportunity and pulls the trigger, right? He's gonna farm EMP fast. It's fine. And when he does that, he can just pull the trigger and see opportunities and get instant value off of these like he gets like a 10%, 15%, 20% advantage every single time rather than trying to guarantee a fight win like half the time. So, um, yeah, so that's Lip in a nutshell when it comes to how he plays. Um, so yeah.